India's advancement in economic and social spheres is forging a new paradigm for global development.
Make in India आज समय की मांग है.
We are enjoying a continuum of growth, progress and tradition.
India is on the move.
And with the unwavering certainty of a bold vision, we've propelled India onto an unstoppable path. Our economy is constantly renewing and reinventing, putting India in a globally enviable position. And a meticulously outlined political agenda will strengthen our regional and global clout. Presenting the 4th edition of the Times Now Summit, the confluence of leading policymakers, strategists, experts and influencers shaping India's unstoppable growth. Only on the Times Network.
Just a quick reminder, this of course is our 4th summit. We'd like to ask everyone here, the audience, as well as all of you who may be joining us from your homes, watching us on your television sets. You can join in on social media, connect with us, post your videos, your thoughts, your views on the Times Now Summit using the hashtag of #TN Summit 2024. But for the time being, let's move on and help me welcome on stage the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Shri Sanjeev Sanyal. He will be in conversation with my co-host and executive editor of Times Now, Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan. Madhav, over to you.
Thanks so much for that, Meghna. We all know, in fact, Mr. Sanyal as a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, but he wears very many hats. Not just an economist, he's also written a lot of books on history, more recently on our entire freedom movement, about the entire history of 1,000 years before that. And very, very interestingly, I'm going to talk to him about a project that he has, related to history, of course, that he just told me 15 minutes ago and surprised me very pleasantly about. Mr. Sanyal, you are also working beyond your historical and academic projects on something related to a ship. Can you tell us about this?
So, as you just mentioned, I've written many books. One of the books I wrote was called The Ocean of Churn, which is a history of the Indian Ocean. And the reason I wrote that book is that for reasons that we can debate, our history is very often told to us as a terrestrial, landlocked history. Whereas, in fact, if we just look at a map, look, we are the only country in the world which has an ocean named after it. And not surprisingly, a very large part of our history is actually maritime. And yet the only thing we hear about it, the Cholas did some raid on the Indonesia 1,000 years ago. That's pretty much the sum total of what you will hear. Whereas in fact, we have probably the most colorful maritime history of any country in the world, going back to the Bronze Age. I mean, there were Indians sailing to Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. So I thought that one way of rediscovering it is to actually build a ship from, thousands of years ago. So I did some research as a part of writing that book, but then later on built on it, and then discovered that there are still a very small number of people who have retained the technique of building ships by stitching them together. Now, they haven't built for many generations a large ship. They built coastal, small boats, etc.
So when you say stitching them together, this is without nails,
without nails.
Modern carpentry.
Yeah,
they're interlocked
and stitched together with using coir ropes. So it's a completely unique technique. The technique was used for thousands of years for Indians to build ocean-going ships. It's now rapidly dying out, but I thought that before it dies out, let me get hold of these guys. And then, based on a painting in Ajanta, and a book called the Yukti Kalpataru, which is an ancient book written by Raja Bhoj in the 9th century, and then other evidence that I also gathered. So putting all together, we are now building this ancient ship, built pretty much with it's got pretty much nothing modern in it, except the toilets. And we are, it has no nails in it, so we are building this ship. And as we speak, it's being put together by this last group of people who remember this technique in Goa, in Diwar Island.
And what's very interesting, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's not just a showpiece. You're actually going to sail this down all the way across various Asian countries. And that's going to be quite a task. You're going to be sailing with it.
Yes, I intend to sail with it. Why would I take all the trouble and not let somebody else have the fun? So, yes, so the ship is being put together, and about a year from now, we will have it in a position to put it in the water. Then it'll take some time to test it and kit it out. But in December, the Honorable Prime Minister and His Highness the Sultan of Oman made a joint declaration that the very first voyage of the ship will be from India to Muscat, from Mandvi to Muscat, to be precise. It's a three-week voyage. And if that succeeds, we will then take it to the other coast and try and sail from Kalinga or Odisha all the way to Bali to recreate the Bali Jatra. That's probably a 2-3 month voyage. So that's some distance away, but...
And 2-3 months. Round of applause. Because it's not going to be easy. There are no modern amenities on this ship. You won't have any electricity. You won't have any kind of navigation.
No air conditioning, blazing hot. And, there'll be storms and other nasty things that will happen. And remember, we also don't know exactly how the ship will behave in water. Because, as I said, the hull is flexible since it's stitched together. It's not nailed together. It doesn't have a proper rudder. It has a trailing oar, which is what ancient ships used to use. We don't have lantern sail. We are using square sails, which is a type of sail that was used in ancient times. But remember, modern sailors don't use this. So my crew, which the Indian Navy is very kindly providing, which will be about 12 people from the Indian Navy, these sailors are expert sailors in modern ships. But when sailing a new ship like this, they will have to relearn the whole thing. So I am very grateful to the Ministry of Culture and to the Indian Navy for supporting this somewhat madcap project of mine.
And in fact, I'm told that we have some images ready of your ship that we were discussing a short while ago. Let's quickly get that on the screen so that we can show what, in fact, Mr. Sanyal is talking about and the kind of difficult circumstances. If we can quickly get those images on the screen and you can describe them to us. I believe we have it on the screen here. Are we going to get it on the screen? Well, I don't think they're up.
Okay, whenever it comes up.
Whenever it comes up yet. But let me ask you a couple of other questions. You've also spoken very interestingly, and your Netflix series that has come about, it's going to be talking a lot about the revolutionaries and several of the lesser known freedom fighters. What inspired you to do that? Was there some particular thought process, perhaps your own personal experiences that drove you to that?
See, the book that I've written, Revolutionaries, which came out last year, is about the armed resistance to British colonial rule. Now, the way the official story of our freedom struggle is that it was somehow uniquely non-violent, that we politely asked the British to leave and they left. Bina khadak, bina dhal. But the fact of the matter is, the resistance to British rule has a very long history and much longer history of armed resistance, going back to the Marathas, Sikhs, polygars and so on. But into the 20th century of a very well-organized revolutionary movement. As it happens to be, both my mother's and father's family were involved in it. And this story is somehow never told. You have these occasional sort of stories about individual greats, Chandrasekhar Azad did something, Bhagat Singh did something. But you're left with the impression that these were random acts of resistance. Brave maybe, but didn't add up to anything. But in fact, it was an organized movement with clear objectives, which was sustained by the same people over and over again. So, Raj Bihari Bose, not Netaji, it was Raj Bihari Bose who set up the INA in Singapore in 1943. Now, Raj Bihari Bose has actually almost succeeded in doing the same thing in the First World War also. He had escaped to Japan because it fell apart, the Gadar rebellion. But why I'm telling you this is that this was an organized movement over a half a century. And this was only the last part of the armed resistance. So this story is unfortunately not systematically told. And all I've done in the book Revolutionaries is to put it together, show that these are the same characters repeating themselves with a clear mandate of whatever objectives. In fact, it is the revolutionaries who first came up with the idea that India should be totally free, not a dominion, that India should be a democratic republic, with full universal franchise. This was at a time when the Congress was still demanding dominion status, and even Britain did not give vote to women. So it was the Indian Republic of today, the Democratic Republic of today, is the brainchild of the revolutionary movement.
Right. What are we looking at happening over here? Because there are those who say that we are looking at a rewriting of history. There are those who would say that this is a distortion of history. And there are those who would say that this is just a correction or setting the record straight of what didn't happen for so many years. How do you look at it?
Read the stories I'm putting together and telling. For example, just take the revolutionary piece. Just this story, and my book is fully referenced. And these histories are not long ago. They have happened almost within living memory. I, in fact, personally knew many of these people in the 80s because some of them survived into the 80s. And so there are lots of records, there are personal testimonies, police records, newspaper articles, all kinds of evidence for how our freedom struggle was fought from the armed resistance perspective. And they have a completely different and entirely intellectually coherent explanation for how India became free. Now, it is possible that there are other views of the world, but look, that's fine.
Let me bring you on to the economy aspect as well. While we've grown at 8.5%, 8.4%, I beg your pardon, in the previous quarter, these numbers, of course, are impressive. There are some doubts being raised about the authenticity of the GDP numbers. Mr. Arvind Subramaniam, the former chief economic advisor, said that the latest GDP numbers are mystifying, and he believes that they do not add up. He's spoken about FDI coming down as well as corporate investment below 2016 levels. How do you respond to this, sir?
It may be mystifying to him, but there's nothing very deeply mystifying. You can look at the data, it's publicly available. You're all from, many of these people here work in companies or run companies, look at your own balance sheets. Can you not see the growth in top line and bottom line? Just drive around any major part of India, any major city, can you not see the construction of infrastructure, the construction of housing, of offices? Can you not see it? You can feel this. This is not a theoretical thing. In fact, some of the negative aspects of this rapid growth are also visible. The wonderful air that we have to breathe. Right? The pollution is also a part of this. So, point of the matter is, it's visible. Now, you can, debate about double deflation. Maybe the deflator should have been a little bit up and down. Okay. I mean, willing to debate it, and there are different stories on that. The fact of the matter is India's economy is now growing at a very rapid pace, should be visible. If it didn't concord with what we can visibly see, then we can have a debate.
Yeah. Sometime back, few months back, we saw Raghuram Rajan tell Rahul Gandhi that the rate of growth would be best at around 5%. Now, at 8.5%, it's of course quite far off that mark. But the question that many would have in their minds is that, is this 8.4 sustainable?
First of all, I can't explain what Raghu had in mind. That you should ask him. But as far as 8.4 is concerned, let me tell you that a lot of this is being driven entirely by internal generation of growth. We are getting no help from the rest of the world, because the rest of the world, most of our markets are not growing. I mean, Japan is in recession, Germany is in recession, UK is in recession, the US is growing, but there are all kinds of issues with it. So, this is internally generated growth. Now, just before me, Professor Panagaria was here, and he was saying double-digit growth. Now, look, it's possible for us to hit double-digit growth, but I would actually be rather careful about it. This whole game is about compounding growth. So, is this machine that we have brought here capable of generating double-digit growth? Yes, it is, but under very favorable external conditions only. we should not attempt to grow this economy by anything more than what it is growing now if the external environment does not dramatically improve. Because what will happen then is that our external accounts will begin to overheat, our inflation will begin to overheat, and so on. You can only generate very high rates of growth past what we are growing right now if external environment is conducive. Otherwise, we should be satisfied with what we are doing, or even something in the range of 7% is perfectly good. Key is, do not lose control of macroeconomic stability. It was a very hard-earned thing that we had to do. I mean, as somebody who was involved in cleaning up of the banks, let me tell you, it's like extracting teeth. It's not a fun thing to do. Again, I was a member of the team that managed the economy through the COVID period. Very, very difficult. And at every stage you will have noticed, the thing we emphasized was stability. We were restrained on the fiscal side, we were restrained on the monetary side throughout this whole cycle. Why? Because we are trying to ensure that the macroeconomic stability side is well anchored. So if push comes to shove, if we have to choose, be very clear. We will choose stability over growth. Because this game is about compounding this over 25 years. That's the Amrit Kal cycle. Any 1 year, I don't get emotional about whether we hit 8 or 7 or whatever. In fact, this 8.4 is a wonderful surprise. Our own forecasts, if we will remember, for the government were 6.5 to 7%. And if it grows at 7%, we would have been perfectly happy.
Right. In fact, if we can now at least bring up on the side screens, I believe we can bring up those images, I'm told, by our production team. And if we can quickly just go through those images very quickly. Yeah, take us through these images. What are we seeing?
So this is the image. Oops, you'll have to hold it there at one of the images, then I'll explain each one of them one by one. So this image, the very first one, is the image of Nau Devi. You see, since we had this maritime culture of crossing the oceans, every maritime community in ancient times used to worship a local deity, usually a female deity. So in Goa, they used to worship Nau Devi. Now, Nau Devi, there were many shrines to Nau Devi. Most of them were destroyed during the Portuguese period. But I did manage to find one in the forests of Goa. And so this is what a Nau Devi looks like. And this is the goddess to which the ancient mariners used to worship before they set out on these voyages. So before building the ship, I went and actually prayed to Nau Devi. And so this is the shrine of Nau Devi. So next image. Okay. So as I told you, this shipbuilding that is happening is not happening with any nails. This is being actually stitched together. So this is the image of how the stitching is done. You can see a specially prepared coir rope. This is not any old coir rope. A specially prepared coir rope is used, and the holes are made in the planks. And then the coir rope is taken through them, and then the holes are fixed with a gum called kudrus. So this is how it is done. So this is one image. If you move to the next slide. So this is what the ship will look like. It's going to be 21 meters long. So it's about 65 feet long. So it's not a small ship. It will be about this length of this stage, perhaps.
It's from the 4th century, you said.
Yeah. So it's from the 4th century because it's based on a painting in Ajanta. And you can see the square-rigged sails, which I told you are a particular kind of sail, which means that you cannot sail too much of an angle to the wind. You have to sail basically with the wind, which puts all kinds of restrictions on how you sail it. There is no rudder. You can see there's a trailing oar. And there are many other features which are completely pre-modern. So modern sailors actually have to relearn sailing for sailing these ships, because its characteristics in a storm, for example, is unknown. Because remember, for example, the hull is going to flex. You know, big wave comes, the hull actually flexes inward and outward. Now, what happens to the sailing characteristics in a storm, we don't know. So all of this will have to be tested out so that we understand how it works. Similarly, modern sailors know what to do with a lantern sails and at what angle to sail to the wind. We will have to figure out what happens with a square sail and so on and so forth.
Well, safe travels from all of us here at the Times Network. Sanjeev Sanyal, a round of applause for Mr. Sanyal for, that.
Thank you.